Hello, everyone, and welcome along to the Debrief live on the Blood Red YouTube channel after Liverpool are knocked out of the FA Cup following Kaoru Mitoma's late winner for Brighton. Yes, Liverpool lost 2-1 after Harvey Elliott's opener. Lewis Dunk had a slightly strange deflected goal, and then Mitoma's late finish, very well taken from him, but more Liverpool disappointments. You join me, Patrick Smith. I'm joined today by Matt Addison as well, our Liverpool.com editor, to another Liverpool post-mortem, should we say, Matt? We've got plenty to dissect in this one, haven't we? Let's just get your general overview, though, because, I mean, it's already proving to be a pretty divisive match today across the Liverpool fan base, isn't it?
Yeah, it certainly is. Yeah, some interesting replies to my tweets post-match. But yeah, look, it's one of those where I think it's simultaneously nowhere near what we want to see from Liverpool, and clearly nobody is saying on the basis of that game that that's it, they're back and Liverpool don't need to sign anyone. Clearly no one is saying that. I think the situation is very, very similar to what we've seen for the past few weeks, really, for Liverpool. But I do think that there were a couple of moments there where they got better. You know, Cody Gakpo, I think that was his best performance in a Liverpool shirt up to this point, but it still wasn't anywhere near what Liverpool needed to. I think that's, a fair assessment to suggest that they've got much better than what they were. It's only 2 weeks since they lost 3-0 to Brighton in what Jurgen Klopp described as the worst performance of his career. So, I'm saying that they're better, but they are still very much, with a long way to go and a lot of things that still need to be turned around. So, yeah, my initial impression is basically it's a lot better than what it has been, but that still wasn't enough really to make you convinced that Liverpool were going to go on and win that game. Obviously, in the end, they've lost it because of some slack defending at the back. Mitoma, I thought, was controlled quite well for much of the game. There was a couple of moments where he went past Trent and then Milner when he came on, but generally, didn't completely run riot. But then at the end, he's got too much space and, is ultimately able to punish Liverpool. So, look, it wasn't a good Liverpool performance, but relative to the low bar that they've put in this season, there were a couple of things that make you think possibly, Harvey Elliott might be, a positive to take from it. Stefan Bajcetic was another one that I thought did pretty well. Obviously got the yellow card and, showed a little bit of immaturity, I think, with that. But in amongst the poor season that Liverpool are having, there has certainly been far worse performances than that, I would say.
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing. There's a difference between, a positive performance of what Liverpool should be, because it wasn't that, but there are definitely positives you can take from it. I think that's the key message we really want to get at. This is nowhere near the level Liverpool should be at, but they've been nowhere near that level this entire season. And, they lost to Brighton, obviously 3-0 a couple of weeks ago. Now, a last-minute 2-1 defeat there is a slight improvement, albeit slight. I mean, Matt, what do you think is the main takeaway from today? People are talking about the midfield maybe by Bajcetic, or are we more impressed defensively? Because obviously the front line weren't exactly firing. What do you think is the main takeaway from today?
I think there's a couple of things that I take away, to be honest. I think that the midfield I'll come to first, the attack as well, probably the other one. But I think the midfield, I think you look at the game next weekend against Wolves, certainly when you look at the performance that Fabinho put in when he came off the bench, but Jordan Henderson didn't particularly do much either. I think, to see Naby Keita, Stefan Bajcetic and Thiago as well in there, I think, realistically, there is, a possibility that they will be the three next weekend. That's certainly what I would look to do. I think, they were, again, relative to a low bar, but much better than, potentially Fabinho and Henderson and those players could have been. So I think the midfield was generally a positive. You certainly compare it again, you're comparing it to an extremely poor performance against Brighton a couple of weeks ago. It was better than that. It still isn't perfect. Naby Keita, I think, could still do a little bit more. He's still not quite, convincing, but, it was his winning of the ball that led to the goal. It was, a couple of good moments that allowed Liverpool to control the match. So I do think, there was, a couple of moments within that. Obviously, the substitutions in the second half do change things. They made Liverpool worse, and ultimately Liverpool have gone on to lose the game. But I think certainly that starting trio, that should be what it is next week. And I think the other sort of talking point really is what the forward line looked like. I'm not a massive fan of Harvey Elliott off the left, but I thought he did quite well. And I think he kind of showed quite a lot of maturity, I think, in terms of realising that he's not going to do much. He's not the quickest player. He's not going to knock the ball past someone and beat them. So he was, coming inside. That's where the goal comes from, that kind of position. He was picking up different opportunities to try and create things and take a bit of that responsibility from the middle. So I think that was certainly something that was good. And I mentioned Cody Gakpo as one of the kind of positives in terms of the improvement. Again, a long way to go for him, but I thought there were, a good few occasions where he did try and link the play. He certainly looked a lot better than what he did against Chelsea a week ago. So yeah, those are kind of the two main things. Obviously, it's still a long way to go for Liverpool to be back, and for us all to be sat here happy after a win. The fact that they've only lost 2-1 to Brighton isn't particularly the positive that people wanted to talk about today. But yeah, I do think there was a couple of glimmers really to cling to, even though it's going to be a tough second half to the season without any signings, which I suspect by the 11 p.m. deadline, I think, is it on Tuesday? I suspect by that point, there probably won't be any more players coming in. But, that's the choice that Liverpool have made, and we can criticise them as much as we want for that. I certainly don't think that that's the right thing to do, but ultimately I don't have the influence. I am not Julian Ward. I'm not Liverpool sporting director. I'm not John Henry. I can't really do too much about that.
Yeah, believe it or not, we aren't able to get in touch with FSG and tell them to buy someone as much as we'd like to do that. But, I mean, Matt, I agree with you. The main takeaway for me is I'm, not happy, but the midfield three that played today and has played the past couple of games is the one that I'd definitely be starting going into next weekend. And I think it sort of went downhill when that was changed. I mean, Fabinho, once again, let's just touch on him because the substitutions Klopp made, I mean, sort of enforced due to fatigue. But, I mean, Fabinho, once again, Matt, terrible from him. I mean, really lucky not to be sent off. I mean, everyone knows, even Fabinho himself knows, that's a straight red card. It's reminiscent of Gerrard Jumbo against Man United in 2011 or something, came on straight red. I mean, what has happened to Fabinho this season?
Yeah, it's incredible, isn't it? I mean, the one thing you don't do when there's a VAR situation is walk around the pitch for 5 minutes with your head in your hands going, what on earth have I done? I mean, it just, if the VAR didn't look at that, I mean, it probably should have been a red card, and the fact that he reacted in the way that he did is just very, very strange. But yeah, no, it was another ridiculously poor performance from him. I just don't know quite what has happened. We've seen it a few times over, even last season when Liverpool were going for everything. He didn't have the greatest of seasons. I think you could start to see that he was on the turn, but then I don't think anyone could have predicted the absolute drop off a cliff really in his performances so far this season. We've seen absolutely nothing from him, and I was surprised actually that Stefan Bajcetic stayed on as long as he did, given he had the yellow card from that first half. But then, the 10 minutes that Fabinho was on the pitch was just atrocious. I don't really know what more you can say really about him. It's kind of got to the point where it's just his legs have gone. He can't run. He's not putting himself in the right positions. And like I say, it's not really a short term thing. It's kind of been probably 18 months or so now. It's kind of been such a sustained period of time, really, that they are going to have a little bit of a think about that. We've seen so many times this season, Jurgen Klopp on the touchline absolutely screaming and going crazy at him. Whenever he's had the opportunity not to play him, he's kind of put other players in there, but it's obviously not been too often given the injuries and the form of the others. It's a really, really tough one. It's got to the point, really, I think, where there's probably not too many Liverpool players. I know it's been discussed a little bit this week where you'd say, well, there's not that many options to kind of generate a bit of money in the summer and maybe sell someone and refresh things. I think Fabinho is probably one of those now that I'd put in the category of just see how much you can get for him and possibly move him on and try and find a replacement, because I think with someone like Jordan Henderson, obviously he's had some incredibly poor performances at times really in the last 18 months, but there has still been moments where he's looked bright. I think he looked really good for England at the World Cup, and he kind of was rejuvenated in those moments. But with Fabinho, it's just been the same now. There's not really been any glimmers of hope. It's just been the really poor performances that we've seen, like today. That's kind of become the norm now, which is it's a real shame, and I'd love to think that he can turn it around, but at this point, I just don't know whether his legs might have gone, and it might just be a little bit too late for that. But we'll see. Hopefully he can find some form and get into a decent bit of rhythm for the rest of this season. I'm not going to hang my hat on it, but we mentioned the transfer stance before. They're going to need players like that to kind of find some form from nowhere. And other players that have been out, even Diogo Jota, people are talking about him being back in a couple of weeks, and could he save Liverpool's season? Well, even before he got injured, he wasn't exactly in the greatest of form. So, yeah, a good few problems still to be solved, but let's cling to the positives if we can. And I think, as we mentioned before, the midfield that started today, Harvey Elliott, there was one or two things, even if it's still pretty much a bit of a mess for Liverpool to sort out at the moment.
Yeah, I mean, I just think there on Fabinho, maybe a move in the summer could be the best thing for both parties because, to be fair to him, 2 games under Jurgen Klopp in that high, intense pressing system, playing, 50, 60-odd games in back-to-back years, winning all those matches is going to take it out of you. Perhaps he could benefit himself from a move to a perhaps slower league like the Serie A, maybe Juventus or someone, who knows. We're just going to finish off, Matt, with a bit of chat about Cody Gakpo again, not on the score sheet, which some fans are desperate for him to do. I'm sure he himself is desperate to get on the score sheet. Looked a little bit lost at times in the centre. I mean, he is, an orthodox left winger. He's showing glimpses of what he can provide for us. And obviously, Darwin Núñez is slightly injured again this week. That's why he got started. But would you be next week definitely putting Gakpo on the left, or would you, stick with him down the middle?
Personally, I'd play him off the left. I think that's his best position, but it looks to me like they're looking at this a bit more long term. I did find it interesting when he came in actually from PSV. The first interview he did, he kind of talked a little bit around wanting to play through the middle, wanting to be a false 9. That's where he played for the Dutch national team at the World Cup. It kind of looks to me like that's what they see for him long term. Obviously, Roberto Firmino's contract is up at the end of this season. I wonder whether he might be the replacement, a bit like the Mane and Diaz thing last year, where one comes in 6 months before the other. It kind of looks a little bit like that to me. And that's a little bit of a concern on what we've seen so far, because as much as there was, an improvement from him today, and, we've not seen loads of him. It's not a huge sample size to base this on. I don't think he's quite looked comfortable in that role just yet. Maybe when the rest of the team functions better, and maybe when he's got Diaz and Jota and better players around him, possibly things can change. Darwin Núñez as well, obviously didn't start today. So I personally would prefer to see him off the left, but at the same time, you kind of think, well, they do have a lot of other players that can play in that position. Firmino's going to be a bit of a strange one to replace when he does go. There's not that many players that have got that skill set. So I can kind of see the logic to a certain extent in them trying that. At the moment, though, I think it's going to be a little bit of short-term pain, hopefully for some long-term gain, because it doesn't quite work. I do think there was a few glimmers. There was that moment, I think, when Lewis Dunk got the yellow card. He picked up the ball and went past a couple of people, made the right decision, and looked like he was going to create something, but then he was sort of cynically tugged back and hauled down. So there were a few moments, but it's just a little bit too many players being too average and too many players all at once trying to find out these things. It's all right maybe to have Cody Gakpo trying to implement that if you've got the rest of the team functioning, but you've got him trying to do that. You've got Harvey Elliott in a new role on the left. You've got an 18-year-old midfielder trying to dictate things. You've got Naby Keita playing his second game of the season. The defence isn't quite perfect at the moment. I don't think the fullbacks were particularly brilliant today. So no one was absolutely atrocious, but no one quite managed to get it right. And I think when you've got that many things that are a little bit uncertain, it's I suppose uncertain is the right word, isn't it? It's just a bit of an uncertain period for Liverpool. So it's going to be a difficult one, and it's going to be a hard second half to the season, I think. But if they can just take those little steps, I'm sure Jurgen Klopp will try and pick up the positives and go again. But yeah, there's a fight to get into that top 4, but I'm not giving up hope just yet.
Yeah, I think you've just summed it up perfectly there. I mean, it's gone from being one of the most perfectly well-oiled machines last season, potentially one of the greatest club sides we've ever seen, to now it's basically an experiment, isn't it? I mean, every single area of the department of the pitch is an experimental phase at the moment, and it's Liverpool Football Club should not be in that position if we're being totally honest. But anyway, we'll wrap it up there. Liverpool are out of the FA Cup, unfortunately. We've got Wolves away to look forward to next weekend. So we'll be back with a debrief after that one. But for today, everyone, make sure you stick around on the Blood Red YouTube channel. We'll bring you Jurgen Klopp's press conference as soon as we have it. I'm sure you're all very eager to hear what he has to say, as am I. But from myself, Patrick Smith, and Matt Addison, thank you so much for joining us on the debrief. We'll catch you next time.